Hey there. So today I'm going to show you how to make an API call using jQuery and Ajax based off of user input. So meaning we're going to build a little search engine that a user types in the name of a movie, like Big. They're going to click Submit. We're going to query an API, the Open Movie Database API. We're going to get data back and display it on the page. So this is a pretty standard thing to do. Like the functionality of this happens quite often on different websites. This is an essential skill to have as a front-end web developer. So the Open Movie Database is a RESTful service. RESTful refers to a certain set of conventions with regards to how the API is set up. We won't go into depth right now. But basically, they give you an endpoint. You need to get an API key, which I've already done. But you can just go here and punch your email in, and they'll give you one. And we see that we send all requests to this URL. There's then different parameters which we can use. So if we want to search for a particular movie, we could just use the parameter T, search for the title. Or if we wanted to search for movies in general, anything with the word big in it, we would use the parameter S. And then there's different modifications we can use here. So this is pretty standard just as far as API documentation goes, just to see this kind of setup, right? Like usage, endpoints, examples, parameters, and stuff like that. So let's take a look at what we have in our code pen. We have an input with a type of search, and it has an ID of search, a button with an ID of submit, and that's what the label reads. So we've brought in jQuery. You go to settings, JavaScript, you can just search for jQuery here, like so. You can click on that. And we are waiting for our document to finish loading. And once that has completed, then we're going to run whatever is in the body of this function. So we're going to be using the jQuery Ajax method. So here's the jQuery docs. This is going to help us perform an asynchronous HTTP request. And we are going to do something like this. We're going to use the Ajax method and pass in an object. That object is going to contain the URL that we want to make a request to. By default, this is going to make a GET request. Then we're going to, once that's complete, we're going to do something with the information we get back. So we'll do the Ajax method, pass in an object, and the URL is going to be this thing right here. Now, so at the moment, this would run when our document loads, but we want this to happen on a button click, right? When a user clicks submit. And let's actually take a step back for a moment and just list out what we're trying to do. The goal is to have this search engine working. So what's the user flow? As a user, I want to be able to in text, click submit, view movies on page. On the technical side, we want to detect when submit button is clicked, grab user input, so whatever they type in here, use the user input in our API call, parse the response back from the API, basically like look at it, grab what we want, and then display data accordingly. Piece of cake. Piece of cake. Okay, so from the technical side, we wanted to detect when the submit button is clicked. So the submit button has an ID of, conveniently, submit. So we will say submit dot click. We're going to use our arrow function syntax, and let's see if that catches it. Okay. Now, how do we get the value of this text? Input has an ID of search. What we can do is create a variable called user input. We'll set this equal to the value of whatever the search element contains. So instead of alerting clicked, let's alert user input. Look at that. Boom, done. Boom, done. Working on it. Okay, so we have a variable user input which contains the data we want. First of all, let's bring this API call into our callback and see what happens. This alert happens. Notice we get this error here. We can see we're trying to make a request to this URL, but we haven't actually plugged in an API key yet. So I've already copied, I've gone through the process and gotten an API key. I've copied it to my clipboard. I'm going to paste it. I trust that you guys can go through that process. Make sure we're using the HTTPS version. And okay, so what we've done here is hardwired the word big in. Okay, so let's look at, we type the word test or something. It's going for the word big. So we're getting movies back based off of that search. So we want to actually use the user input. So what we're going to do is we're going to add backticks here so that we can use string interpolation. And we're going to pass the value of what the user has actually put in. We're going to comment out the alert. Now if we type in test, right, we're searching for movies with the title test. So what we can do, okay, so now we want to do something with the response. So let's go ahead and console.log the response. And we see that there is an object that contains some things. So this is a property of text. Here is a search property which contains an array, and this is the gold right here. That's what we want to work with. So specifically, we want to work with this search array. So res.search. Let's see what that looks like. If we look just at that search array, here are the objects that we want. So we're going to create a variable, call this in movies equals res.search. We're going to use jQuery's each method, which takes an array, and we pass it a function. And the function is going to run for each element in the array, and we're going to have access to the index and the element for each object. So let's go ahead and do console.log. We'll just say index, I, element. Okay, so we see this, the first item with an index of 0, this object, and so on. So for each object, we have access to these properties. So what we really want is the poster property. So we're going to do console.log e.poster. And instead of seeing this whole object here, we're going to see just the value of the poster property for each object. Okay, so here's a URL for an image. So what if we said poster equals e.poster? with me. So we have console.log poster. We would expect to see the URL of the image for each poster for each movie that we are currently on as we loop through the entire array. Okay, so now that we know we're getting the image for a particular poster while we're looping through the entire array of posters, we want to put these posters onto the page. So we're going to target the body element. We're going to append to it. We're going to append image tag. Now, we want this value to be a variable. We want it to be the value of poster. So we're actually going to use backticks here. So we can do string interpolation and use that JavaScript variable. We want to be sure to include an alt tag. For like screen readers and accessibility purposes. There we go. What's up with this one? Is that happening for all? I guess that one doesn't have it. So there's all sorts of things we could do to improve this, obviously. Like if we did, you don't want to just keep appending, right? If you search for one, like you search for test again, it's going to duplicate it because it just keeps appending to the page. Obviously the style, there's like no styling. We're getting some, error here. So we could compensate for that and say, like if they're like only try and display it if there is an image, we could kind of resize the images so they all look the same and organized. We could put them in an element besides just the body. And I might do another video for that, kind of going on some styling of this. But for this video, we've covered the functionality. We'll go back to our list. So from the technical side, we are detecting when a user submits click. When a user detect when submit is clicked. We're detecting when the user clicks submit. We're grabbing the user input, using the user input in our API call. We're parsing the response, and we're displaying the data accordingly, meaning according to what the user asked for. So for functionality, we have covered this. Go ahead and watch part 2, which I will be putting up shortly to look at how we can go ahead and improve this. All right, hope you enjoyed.